welcome to another weekly episode of the Beer Fridge Podcast, Real Beers, Real Breweries, Real Opinions, sponsored by This Week in Craft.beer. Sign up to the free weekly newsletter, get all the craft beer news from your favourite breweries and that all-important new beers list as well. This Week in Craft.beer. And we're powered by Patreon. Head to patreon.com/Beer Fridge Podcast. Show your support for the podcast and you can get access to exclusive content. Patreon.com/Beer Fridge Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Beer Fridge Podcast, Real Beer, Real Breweries, Real Opinions. Make sure you follow us on all our social media pages, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Just search Beer Fridge Podcast. As always, my name is Gavin Baxter. I've got my usual drinking buddies, Scott, Callum and Mark. Evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. And tonight we are joined by Andy and Patreon superstar Joe from Old City Brewing. How you doing, guys?
Hey guys, not too bad.
That's
I had to throw that in, Joe. Sorry, mate.
No, that's fine. I accept that. I'll take that. I'll take that compliment.
100%. So,
Highest of accolades.
again, super excited for this one. Vault City, definitely one of the podcast's favourite breweries. Obviously, very local to us as well, which makes it even better.
Sorry.
And yeah, so we're looking forward to kind of getting stuck in. So, I think we're all on the same beer. I think.
Just a bit.
Should
I'm
be.
hoping so.
I managed to scrounge
fix that real quick.
this is the sum totally what I could scrounge off my other half. As soon as you saw the bottle, that was it. She's like, no, that's that. You use my car to deliver the beer to everybody else. I get to keep that. I was like, right, okay, fair enough. I need one mouthful, please.
Well, there you go. Since you started, Gil, give us your thoughts and tell us what you're drinking.
So this is the Pear Drop Session Sour, which is intended to be a nostalgic hit of hard-boiled pear drop sweets. It is 4.8%, so effectively table beer in Vault City standards. It's nice and light, but on the nose immediately, it packs all that kind of nostalgic sweet shop aroma that you're looking for. It pours a lovely colour, exactly as you would expect for a kind of a pressed pear, but it does have that lovely sweet hit on it. Sometimes the fruit on its own, or what is the fruit on its own, sometimes it can come across as a bit kind of tart if you don't get pears at the right point. This is lovely. It's got that kind of sweet hit that you expect for something that's come out of an old school sweet shop. It stays on your tongue for a long enough period of time. It's not overly sour. It's just a slight kind of tartness that keeps it kind of zingy and no overly sickly. It's absolutely superb, and for it only to be 4.8% as well is incredible, meaning that you could drink a fair few, I think.
Oh, man.
Anyway.
That's the most stellar review I think I've had of our beers ever. I guess we fucking nailed it then.
I think so. I think it's superb.
That's the main thing. No, it sounds like you enjoyed it. Yeah, Pear Drop Session Sour is our latest session sour, which we're really, really pleased with, really happy with how it came out. Just like you were saying, that kind of hard-boiled, hard candy sweet, that little bit of sweetness that comes through from our session sours.
Yep.
Really kind of leans into that on the fresh pear note. Pears are notoriously fucking difficult to ferment with because they're basically just water. And you generally find that they ferment out to not an awful lot. But our house mix culture and our fermentation here really lets it shine through. Just a little bit of tartness, a little bit of residual sweetness from the fermentation as well. Gives it a little bit more body, like you're saying, a bit of length on the palate. You pretty much took all the words out of my mouth there, pal. That was a good one.
Definitely, it doesn't take away at all. I mean, I'll move to let the other guys talk and tell you a wee bit about it as well.
Of course.
But it just doesn't disappear. It's as you would expect. Sometimes see for something that's got that session tag on it, but it's not. It's just the flavour's there as far as it's intended to be.
I think our mixed culture works really well. It brings out a lot of kind of sherbet acidity to it, you know. And I think that works really well with the pear and kind of lends to that kind of old school boiled candy kind of thing as well, you know.
Yeah, I think there should always be a bit of tartness with your boiled sweets. That's maybe a personal preference, but that's the way I've always enjoyed my pear drops in my time.
No, definitely. You definitely get that nostalgic feel, like you said, Gil, that kind of walking in a fruit shop when you smell this beer. It is tremendous. And Callum, Mark, you are nodding your head in agreement.
Yeah, it's like an adult. I mean, it sounds stupid saying this because it's a beer, but it's like an adult version of that sort of nostalgic flavour. You know, we all enjoy that boiled sweet sensation, but it's like a grown-up version of that. It's quite sophisticated in its taste.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Sometimes, I mean, I don't know if any of the other guys have tried anything like Perry or anything like that, but that I can find that sometimes quite overpowering. And pear cider is also along that line. I find that to be quite overpowering sometimes, but this is quite mild. On the palate, at least. I mean, on the nose, it's so pear, but it's I find it quite light and refreshing and palatable.
Yeah, it's just quite delicate, you know. Yeah, totally.
Definitely. Mark, as the resident non-sour drinker, this is going to be an experience for yourself, this podcast.
Oh, bro, we're on a journey tonight, are we?
He certainly is. So this is your first step this evening.
It's the perfect spot to start.
How are you know?
No, I'm actually thoroughly enjoying it. When I seen the pear, my first thought was, I'll be intrigued to see how you get the flavour of, like you say, our very watery fruit.
Yeah, for sure.
Into a beer, and the smell that comes off this thing is just phenomenal. It really is. I'm glad it's not overly sour. Put it that way. It does have a tartness to it, and it does take me back to the sweetie. You know, it's giving you that sort of little sugar sort of kick,
little sherbety kick.
Exactly. But it isn't overly like sour, which works to my palate quite well.
Definitely. So
I'm thoroughly enjoying it, to be fair. So that's a tick in the right direction. So.
Yeah, that's always my favorite comment is from someone that doesn't like sour, actively doesn't like sour beer, or even doesn't like beer, you know. And they have a go on some of ours, particularly the session sours are really good with it, and totally turns them around on kind of what these beers can be. And that's a big part of Vault City's mission and what we're all about at the brewery is making these mixed fermentation beers more accessible. Definitely going down the route of making them fun. I think sour beer can be pretty nerdy and exclusive, and the flavors themselves can be pretty difficult to palate. I mean, I first got my start in beer, in sour beer, drinking kind of gooses and lambics when I was about 18. And they blew my tiny mind. I was just like, what the fuck is this? I didn't not like it, but I didn't like it either. You know, I had to really try hard to appreciate the flavors that were there because they're very aggressive. Like some of these beers, some of these mixed fermentation sour beers can taste like licking leather or goatee and animalistic and that kind of thing. Which, don't get me wrong, I love a good leathery lambic, but they're not particularly approachable, shall we say. So the idea behind the session sours in particular is to break down those barriers a little bit, make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more approachable, and get people like yourself who maybe don't like sour beers because you've had a lot of sours that are pretty, you know, hardcore and have something that's a bit more light and breezy and just enjoyable. There's my big thing is always that you shouldn't have to have a degree in microbiology to enjoy mixed fermentation sour beer. You should be able to pick up and go, hey, this tastes like hard-boiled sweets, and that's fucking dope, and I'm going to drink more of it. It's going to be great.
Definitely.
Sorry, we've got the E for explicit on this podcast, don't we?
We certainly
do. For me, that's the important part. You know, I've tried quite a few sours, especially obviously as part of the podcast, and I usually say to the guests, and I probably should have here as well, is that I'm not a big sour drinking fan, and I usually say it how it is. And I have had a few funky looks from breweries. If
you're not upsetting people, you're not doing it right.
You know, we're all about real opinions, I suppose, and that's what it's all about. But it is super easy drinking, and you may have got me sold on that one, to put it that way.
Well, let's go up a level in a minute. We'll see how you get on. Like we said, we're joined by Joe and Andy from Vault City. Gentlemen, give us a little brief history of Vault City.
Sure. So our brief history is fairly brief in the grand scheme of things. We could go on at length about it, but the brewery started back in 2018. So it was two guys started the brewery over a kind of mutual love of homebrewing. And that's where it all kind of came about in a kitchen in Edinburgh. So Steve, the co-founder, the brewery started in his stovetop, brewing kind of 400-liter batches, fermenting in the basement, and putting the very small amount of beer that they could produce there out into the market, mostly through festivals. So they did a big festival push in 2019, ran around all over the UK and all over Europe. People were absolutely loving the beers. That's actually when I tried the beers for the first time. I've worked for sour beer breweries for more years than I can count anymore after all that sour beer. And the first time I tried their beers, it was unlike anything I'd ever tried before. You know, this is sour beer in a whole different category of its own. And when I first tried it, I was really disparaging. I was like, what the fuck is this shit? This is outrageous. This isn't sour beer. You know, this isn't aged in barrels and with Brettanomyces, and it doesn't taste like goats. So this ain't right. But I was really impressed with it. And I really I really admired the kind of forward style or sort of modern approach on sour beer that they were pushing forward. This huge fruiting rates, crazy flavors, in this beautifully balanced sour beer. So at the tail end of the 2019 festival season, Steve and Johnny got the opportunity to jump the brewery in quite a significant step, kind of the big leap of faith moment. It was still a part-time side project at that point. They had full-time jobs that they were keeping up to keep Vault City going. And they had the opportunity to take on a space at 71 Brewing in Dundee. So made the plunge, took the move up to Dundee, and took on a small corner of 71's warehouse. So this was a really interesting point for kind of any brewery, is that it wasn't quite gypsy brewing, not quite cuckoo brewing, not quite contract brewing, somewhere in between all three, where the guys basically had their own space, had all their own cold side equipment, but would use 71 Brewing's brew kit, brew the wort, transfer it across, and then obviously mixed culture was kept as far away as possible from the rest of the brewery. So it was a case of rolling out 75 meters of 1-inch hose to transfer the wort every time we brewed, which one was a heavy bastard to roll across the yard, and two made for really slow wort transfers with such a small hose. But we made do and cracked on in that space for the whole of 2020. So I came on board with the brewery at the start of 2020, just before lockdown hit. So that was fun. So from kind of where it was in 71, we just had the two fermenters. Not long after I started, two more fermenters turned up. And then I think a week after that, lockdown hit, which was pretty wild. So we had just doubled our capacity, but the jump from kitchen to brewery was from 400-liter batches to 4,000-liter batches. So it's a pretty significant jump up in terms of output, you know. And yeah, at the beginning of lockdown, we were packaging by hand still. So everything was put into those kind of slidey drawer gravity fillers. So it's a bit like going to a petrol station late at night where you're passing your money and your bread through, filling 4 bottles. Then we'd take them out, hand cap them one at a time, and then label them one at a time in a little labeler as well.
Sounds like the craft beer kitchen.
Sorry?
Up at Stuart, it sounds like the craft beer kitchen up at Stuart, and you get to make a wee tiny portion of that amount of beer, and you have to go through it, and that is a shift. The only good thing about that is being able to drink at the same time. So you're absolutely right. That's tough.
No, there's definitely no drinking on that bottling line.
All work,
no play. So that was kind of where I came into it from. And not long after that, we were very fortunate to have our bottling line turn up. So our bottling line arrived just in the nick of time for being able to empty out the tanks and get production kind of started up again for the summer last year, which was an absolute dream. I mean, myself and Steve pulled a 24-hour shift between the two of us to package enough beer from one tank to kind of last us a week, pretty much, with online sales and that sort of thing. And then we were able to do the same amount of bottles in an hour with our new bottling line. That's kind of the level of craft that we were at the time. And then, all through last year, we had amazing support from our online community. our web shop got so popular that it basically crashed, or rather I crashed, and we had to pull the plug on the web shop and start again, because it was just a bit of a monster that grew tentacles and arms, wings and horns. And then, started building the team. So started building the team towards the end of 2020 and starting to make the move back to Edinburgh, back to the capital. So that was always the plan, was to use the 71 brewery as a bit of a stepping stone. The intention was always to move back to Edinburgh, but the right space came up at the right time, and we took that plunge. So moved down to Edinburgh, set up the new brewery in Portobello, and had our new brew kit installed just before Christmas. So it was nick of time for the tail end of the year. And it was being commissioned, I think, on Christmas Day. I think Steve was in on Christmas Day brewing on it at one point. So, we then hit 2021 running pretty much. Kind of running like when you're a kid and you're running downhill and you're not sure if you're going to fall over or not. Felt a bit like that. And managed to land on our schedule pretty much bang on, getting 3 beers out every 2 weeks since the second week of January, which for having our brew kit installed just before Christmas is bonkers.
That absolutely is mental. Absolutely mental. I don't know about like you three guys. It almost seems like Vault City's been around like for ages. You don't realise how quite young the brewery is.
Yeah, small brewery, small team. Joe is our latest team member, and he makes us up to 6. And we had 2 of us until October last year, I think. So it's
madness.
Gone from
Mad, isn't it? Yeah.
Gone from small to a pretty small.
And the hype as well is following that. Like the hype of the last kind of year all through lockdown has just went through the roof. You see everywhere on social media, everyone's buzzing about Vault City. I mean, like bloggers and stuff that we talk to, is Vault City amazing, Vault City this, and we're like, they've been around for ages. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was probably a case of we didn't have enough beer to actually get to enough people before,
so
now
the
we're
hype
brewing
started.
a lot more, there's a bigger audience for it. So I guess that's probably helped.
I definitely still see on social media a lot of people who are kind of dropping in comments for, just like you're saying, people are raving about the beers, which is phenomenal that people are so on board with these beers. But there's still a lot of people in the comment section saying like, oh, I need to get a hold of this brewery. I've not tried it yet. And to me, that's bonkers, but then I drink it every day. So I guess my own bias is coming in there.
So from a brewing perspective, then there's obviously been two significant steps, going from the sort of homebrew level kit, then onto the kit at 71, and now your own kit in Edinburgh. How has that affected your brewing process? You can obviously imagine the step from homebrew to commercial, so 400 to 4,000 would have been a massive change, and some tweaking and all the rest of it. How long does it take you to bed in a new kit to the point where you're producing beer that you're happy with, and do the recipes stand up moving from one to the next, or do you have to play around with it a bit?
Yeah, good question. So we were very, very lucky to be able to land a top-notch brewer just as we moved, a guy called Ravi Bos, who's a Dutch brewer. He actually organizes the Carnaval Britannomyces in Amsterdam every year. So he's literally the yeast guy, the sour beer guy. He's a bit of a monster and an operator. But he came on board to be our brewer with the new kit coming in. So he was there for the installation, or he was there for the commissioning, and got running on it pretty quickly. And the really nice thing about brewing is that it is scalable. If you brew it on a homebrew size, you can pretty much brew exactly the same ratios and levels of ingredients or measurements or whatever you want to be standardizing it by to a much bigger scale very easily. Obviously, there's huge idiosyncrasies with every kit, and it'll produce different yields or different efficiencies, and there's things to be considered on that front for sure. But with our beers, our base beer is actually pretty simple. We use locally sourced malt to Edinburgh. It's about 10 miles out of town, and we use pale malt, we use oats, and we use wheat, and that's pretty much it. So our base wort is actually fairly simple and fairly scalable and movable. The real character from our base beer before we add any fruits or any additions is our mixed culture. So it's the mixed culture that we really have to look after and make sure that it's happy. So the bigger piece with moving the brewery from homebrew to commercial and then commercial to our own kit is more making sure that our house mixed culture is happy on that journey as well. obviously has huge technical implications to using different kit and moving around, moving our fermenters, all the rest of it. But yeah, the big piece for us was making sure that our bugs and bacteria were singing when we got there.
And how does that work in terms of storage and transportation and things like that? Because throughout lockdown, the done thing seems to be creating a sourdough starter, and you see all these people that are creating their own. And I suppose
raise hands, how many of them died?
Yeah, so looking after something like that can be difficult. So you can't even imagine being able to look after a mixed fermentation culture. Is it difficult to keep on top of it, or?
Yes and no. So mixed cultures drift inherently by having multiple microbes working to their own ends. Mixed cultures don't being static. So the various yeast strains, various bacterial strains, they all have their own agenda, if you like. They want to do what they want to do. They don't want to do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be quite careful in how you corral them into operating the way that you expect them to. The flip side of that is that kind of these types of mixed cultures and wild yeast and bacteria, not that our yeast is truly wild, it's not Brettanomyces, we use landrace strains in our house mixed culture, but they're pretty hardy bastards, to be honest. These kind of landrace and kvike type strains, they're used to being handled by farmers and being literally laid out on a tray and baked in the oven, and then that's how they would store the yeast, is by baking it at like 50 degrees until it dries out. But it's a pretty goddamn hardy yeast and mixed strain in the first place, so it can take a bit of abuse. But for us, the main kind of thrust of the move and being so seamless with our mixed culture was the speed of it. So we packaged up our last beers in the middle of December in Dundee. So we were operating out of both sites at one point just before Christmas, where another Andy, who's our operations manager, was running the show back up in Dundee with Haig, and myself and Steve were down in Edinburgh, and the beer was still being packaged and produced up there, but wasn't quite being brewed down in Edinburgh yet. So we had this actually quite a short window, because we moved everything in so quickly, that our yeast culture went from one beer to the next beer in a pretty reasonable amount of time. I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks, which isn't terrible. It's not, ideal. Really, you want to be fermenting one day and then maybe resting for a day and then fermenting again the next day, going literally straight from beer to beer to beer. But that's never the way it quite works with your production schedule. So we're pretty fortunate on that front that our tight time schedule worked really well for keeping our mixed culture happy, because yeast wants to be fermenting. It doesn't want to just be hanging around in a warehouse somewhere. But then also the temperature that time of year being so cold, having our yeast ambient wasn't too much of an issue. So when it was being moved around and when we didn't have refrigeration in one place or another, it wasn't too much of a hassle, because Scotland is fucking cold.
And how does environment? Sorry, Gav, I'm taking over. How does your environment affect the yeast, or does it affect the yeast? Because obviously the environment's different in Edinburgh than it is in Dundee. Yeah. So how did you have to manage that in terms of stopping it affecting the taste of the beer?
So the environment's more important in things like truly wild fermentation, open fermentation, spontaneous fermentation, and with barrels particularly, your kind of inherent microbiome in your area with your barrel fermentations is a huge thing. Whereas our beers are all stainless, they don't go into barrels, so it's a lot more controlled environment. It's a lot more sterile environment, which means that we have a kind of greater consistency on that front. However, when we did have our first brews going in, not our first beers, our second round of beers, I think we had that massive cold snap, and that played a bit of havoc, where the initial primary fermentation didn't quite get as high as it normally does. It came through just fine, but that was a bit of a worry, that just the ambient temperature was so cold that the yeast struggling to kick off.
Makes sense.
I say struggling to kick off. It was a little bit slower than its usual absolute savagery that it kicks through our beer.
Gilroy, I think you've opened the next beer on our list, I believe.
Yes, I have. Because I had my one mouthful of the pear drop pretty damn quick. The rest is probably away. So I've opened up the peach and nectarine sour, which I've allowed to kind of. It was sitting in the glass a wee bit as we were talking there because I was too busy listening. But
Sorry
it's
about
no, not at all. What I was going to say was that it's allowed it to warm up, and I think the nectarine really benefits for that. It really comes through the sweetness that towards the. It's kind of 2/3 of the way through as you're drinking it down. It kind of comes through. The stone fruit is. I mean, you've tried it in 13 different beers before. But sour is something that brings it out as something totally different. It has a little bit of bitterness with it because it's, you know, if you're eating the fruit, you get a bit closer to the stone, it starts to taste a wee bit different, which is exactly what comes through in the beer. This one's up at 6.5%, so it's got the. If you've tried Vault City stuff before, if you've heard Strawberry Skies, which is my first, this is kind of along that kind of lines. It has that viscosity. It has the mouthfeel that you're looking for. It's kind of soft, but it's also, you know, you're drinking effectively liquidized fruit. You know, you're not under any illusions that is what you're drinking. It has that bit of heft there behind it that also then suits the bottle that it comes in. Everything's that kind of bit, not overly heavy, but heavy enough so that you know you're drinking some premium, something that's it's got the 500 tons of the actual fruit in it. And that's what it tastes like. It has that little bit of kick of vanilla. It's again another one that I don't think I've ever had a bad beer from Vault City. I must admit that's for definite. The habanero one was I can imagine would be an acquired taste, but I enjoyed
a little
it.
testing,
that was testing. That was a grown up drink, that's for sure. But this the peach and nectarine is there again. I love it. For Mark, this is going to be a proper sour. Know that it draws your jaws together. I think it's just the sourness plus this is one that Mark will think is a.
I think the stone. I think it might be all right with the stone fruitiness.
Yeah, it might be okay, but it'll be a sorbet. It's a liquid sorbet for Mark, I think.
I think the sweetness of the nectarine kind of balances the tartness out a little bit. What are you thinking, Mark?
It's
here we go.
I don't like it as much as I like the pear one. Put it that way.
That's fair.
I'm getting for me, it's got quite a nice wee fizz to it. It's kind of reminded me after like 2 drinks of drinking something like a what's the word I'm looking for, like a Bellini or something along those lines. We've got like the champagne and kind of
sparkling
wine kind of mixed together.
Yeah, Bellini.
For me, it's the bollocks. That's lovely. I agree with Mark. I agree with Scott. You definitely get the peaches. Lovely. It's lovely and thick. You pour it, and the colour's fantastic. The colour is absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, the fruit works really. It's a really good combination. We it was actually a rebrew. We released it initially last year, and I think it was just incredibly popular with drinkers, and I think we love the recipe as well, as far as I'm aware. So, it's just a perfect combination of fruits, I think.
It's lovely, and it's 6.5%, but it's hidden though. It's not like smack you in the mouth, but and again,
notorious for that.
And like it's not overly tart for myself. Mark, maybe it's slightly for you, but for myself, it's not overly tart at all. It's lovely and sweet. The color, I just love the color and the thickness of this.
Yeah, I could look at it all day.
Yeah, like super thick beers like that are just right up my street. Like you pour it and you just want to get a spoon and just eat it.
You can see it. You can see when you're pouring it out the bottle, the difference between the session and this. You can see the difference when it's coming out the bottle, and I think that's just incredible.
That's why you taste the next beer.
Hold your horses, guys. Let's get. So this is our what we would call a serious sour. Mm-hmm. So we kind of categorize our beers a little differently. Like I was saying at the beginning of the kind of Vault City history bit, Vault City makes pretty different sour beer to the rest of the sour beer being produced in the UK. And actually for most of the rest of the world as well, it's fairly unique. There's a few producers in the US doing a similar kind of vibe. But yeah, it's very different to what you can pick up in the UK readily.
Yeah.
So we had a bit of a sit down and talk about how we want to present that. And the term that we kind of came up with was modern sour beer. And I think it fits the shoe or fits the foot pretty well, whichever way you're supposed to say that phrase. It is a very modern take on sour beer. We're very inspired by traditional practices, by old school sour beer, and all of these amazing producers that do great things with mixed fermentation. But we're not beholden to any of that. We're not tied up by historical practices or methods, any of that kind of stuff. And it is pushing the boat out a little bit on what can be considered beer. There was somebody mentioned the other day on a comment that there were fruit lacing as opposed to foam lacing on the glass. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's pretty much where we're at. So this is what we would call a serious sour. We break our modern sour beers into 3 categories. The first being session, which we've already tried, and then the next being serious, and the latter, which we're about to get into, is the silly stuff. But that serious sour for us is all about having that big impact, having that slightly higher ABV, the bigger bottles, like I think it was Scott who was saying, that heavier bottle as well. It's a different drinking experience. We wanted to present it differently. The combination of peach and nectarine is one that I was a little skeptical of last year. This was actually in tank when I started it at Vault City. I was like, you do realize that peaches and nectarines are genetically the same fruit. However, the character of them is very different, and that's why they're known as different names.
Yeah.
The peach for me has this fuzziness, this brightness as well, and chock full of that stone fruit. I think it was Scott again was saying, when you get close to the stone, that character changes. That's the taste of malic acid. So me and Joe had a massive discussion about malic acid the other day and its benefits. But that malic character, stone fruit, is something that's really unique to that character. If you imagine sour plum, that's malic acid. That's that kind of sharp, biting, draws your jaws, which I love that you said draws your jaws. I'm normally the only person to say that on a beer tasting, but that kind of character of eating fresh stone fruit is something that we love coming through from the peach. And then the nectarine, like Joe mentioned, that sweetness and that slightly more floral edge to it. It just works beautifully together in tandem. And the vanilla helps round everything out and smooth off that finish for a little bit of sweetness there. It's sweetness from the vanilla.
Super well balanced. Like, such a balanced beer. And you mentioned about the bottles, like the bottles, I know for us, you could literally you could take the labels off these beers and straight away it's a Vault City beer because of the bottles that you use. It's just such a trademark of Vault City.
That was a big decision from Steve early on. I think right back in 2018, everyone was telling him to put beer in cans, that cans were the way forward and that cans were the best, which is reasonably true for most circumstances. However, these kind of beers, one, they suit bottles better. I think there's a little bit of ceremony involved, popping a cap and you have to put it in a glass. Like, if I've got a tin of beer in front of me, I drink a tin of beer out the tin. I'm not going to lie, but if there's a bottle, I'll crack it and pour it. And they're a little bit bigger as well, that 375. I mean, you can easily kind of put one back by yourself, but you can also share it a bit easier and you don't feel like you're being skimped out on.
Yeah, I was going to say you could share it, but don't.
Yeah.
You could easily share it. You could easily share it, but you don't.
Why would you share it when you could buy 2 though?
Exactly.
Right.
But you always have to pick up 2.
Yeah.
The one question that I've been sort of dying to ask ever since we heard that Vault City were coming on is more a sort of technical around the recipes and stuff, and not that I'm expecting to give away secrets or anything like that, but just give us an idea.
The answer is definitely no.
Just give us an idea of just how much fruit is going into one of these batches of beer.
So we fruit typically about 250 to 300 grams per litre on the beers. So that works out at like 600, 800 kilograms of fruit. So nearly a ton. If we had it was fractionally bigger, then we would mark it up to a ton.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, and that's the difference, because so many beers, so many breweries that make phenomenal beer have tried to do a peach beer, and I'm always of the opinion that peaches and other fruits, they're so delicate, it's so difficult to get that flavour to come through properly in the beer. And this is obviously the secret. You just fucking put about a ton of peaches in it, and that's it.
With the right culture and the right know-how and the right person. But I get what you mean. You've got to back that skill. you've got to back the skill and expertise and the
Exactly.
and the mixed culture with the fruit, the actual tonnage of what it is you're trying to get it to taste like.
You should have a disclaimer on all the bottles saying fruits were harmed in this beer.
100%.
Lots of fruits were harmed in this beer. You mentioned, sorry, Mark, carry on.
I was just going to touch on this one again, just because
I was about to come back to you, Mark, and ask how you're getting on.
it's all right. It's a sorbet, mate. For me, it is. It's a palate cleanser. It's something that I would have, and I said this on to Ian at Brick the other day. If you can make sours as good as this in espresso-sized cups, for me, that would be perfect. And enough just to clear the palate, and then I can move on.
A little tasting cup. You like those little UHT kind of milk things that you get?
Yeah, little peel back lid.
That's awesome.
Maybe a wee bit bigger than that. Maybe a wee bit.
Can you make them 150 milliliter can?
You know what this is reminding me of is the Solero ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly what I get.
That's exactly what it is, and I've been trying to put my finger on it while we're talking. And
wait till you try the next one.
Looking forward to it. But that's exactly what it is. Solero.
No, it's brilliant.
Makes it. No, I get that as well. So you mentioned obviously you kind of categorize the modern sours into three: the session, the serious, and the silly. Let's start at the start of a new beer. Where does the idea come from? Do you pick one of those categories and then go with it, or is it a case of literally we throw an idea at the wall and see if it sticks?
A bit of both. So good question. It can kind of come in fits and starts. If we kind of sit down and have a bit of a round table ideas, recipe generation throw around. Sometimes we find that we come out with loads of banging ideas for session sours and not so much for the other stuff. Likewise, the silly sour category, which I'll get onto in a bit, but if it doesn't get an outright laugh, or if we don't kind of go, nah, we can't do it like that. Can we? Can we get away with that? If it's not that kind of level of reaction, then it's probably not silly enough to sit in our silly sour category.
It's almost like we have to dare each other to kind of.
Yeah. There's a little bit of
I double dare you to make it. It's like, okay.
Yeah. It's usually Steve egging on the massive ideas and Rabbi being super Dutch and saying that he won't do it. That's the perfect sweet spot when those two clash. That's when we know we've got something magical. So it kind of comes from everywhere. We look for inspiration a lot outside of beer. I think it's something that really benefits these kind of styles and the way that we want to present these beers as well. These modern sour beers as a more accessible route into mixed fermentation is taking flavors and particularly flavor combinations from other industries. So we look at food and restaurants, desserts. We look at baking, baked goods, cocktails, soft drinks. The whole shooting match for wherever there's tasty flavors. We're interested in what those flavors are and how they interact, and whether we can make that work in a sour beer. I think it makes it really fun. Obviously, those categories help guide us in what we're doing. We've kind of settled a little bit more with the session sours to have single fruit additions. Yeah, that's something that's just naturally evolved over time. We started off by doing some soft drinks with the cloudy lemonade, the Ribena, and then onto a cocktail one as well for the Havana sour, which was like a mini mojito. And then over time, we've gradually settled into the single fruit, which I think fits that session sour. Easier going. You don't have to worry about it too much. You're not there to dissect it. You're there to sit back and enjoy it.
The beers aren't so big as well that it lets the fruit shine a little bit. When there's a single fruit in there. Yeah. With the sessions, I find as well.
We've found a couple of ingredients that we've used in bigger beers and combinations we've really enjoyed the character of, and so have pulled back a bit and actually introduced them as single fruits into the session sours and into the serious as well, the slightly bigger stuff. So then we start getting a bit more interesting with combinations of flavors and looking out with our beer hats on and more with our flavor hats on for the serious. And like I mentioned with the silly, if it's not fucking stupid, then it ain't good enough.
Is there anything that's been too silly? And I say that but is there anything you've just went, no fucking way? There's just no chance.
There's probably been a few, and I've probably put them out of my mind immediately for having offended me. And I'm sure the team have done the same with some of my ideas. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. That's a good question, actually. I'll have to make some anecdotes the next time we have a recipe discussion.
And the kind of polar opposite to that question is there one initially you thought was a good idea, you've made it, and then it's just not came out right, and you thought,
No, not so much. There's that's a question I wish I could answer differently. But if we've got an idea,
know, it's a question I'd rather you say. No, we've made all the beer we've made is fantastic. Gavin, shut the fuck up.
it's a boring.
It's fantastic. Gavin, shut the fuck up.
It's not far from the truth. We've had so we throw away quite a lot of beer at Vault City. We're pretty uncompromising and unromantic when it comes to bad beer. If it doesn't get a solid 9.5 out of 10, then it's straight down the drain for us, But that usually happens within a couple of days of primary fermentation. If anything goes wrong, it's generally our mixed culture that goes a bit left. And there's usually some good reason for that. Sometimes there's not. That's just the nature of working with these kind of beers. There's a beautiful kind of consistent inconsistency with using mixed cultures, which we've been very fortunate to be able to train our mixed culture to do what we like it to do. But every now and again, it throws us a curveball. If the beer isn't up to scratch, then it goes down the drain. There's a lot of breweries will have a bit of a weird fermentation, and so they chuck a lot of fruit at it. Like, oh, well, it was going to be this, but we'll change it to this. And they throw loads of beautiful, delicious, fresh fruit after this bad fermentation, and it tastes bad. Kel's fucking surprise. And then it doesn't taste good, so they put it in barrels and wait for a year, because maybe that'll fix it. And then they've just wasted a whole bunch of barrels as well. Yep. It's a real shame. Like, if it's bad, it's bad. Just take it on the chin and throw it down the drain. So we account for pouring away quite a lot of beer.
That's something we've heard a lot. We've heard of Vault City throwing away beer, which is a testament to you guys. If it's not Vault City standard, don't bother. And we, like you mentioned, other breweries before. There's a lot of beer that we've had in the past where you drink it and you go, it says this in the can, but it tastes like this. It sounds like they've fucked up. So completely
that's a crying shame. I think that's a bit of a disservice. One to the brewers and two to the product, and three to the consumers as well. That's a little bit by the by, but in terms of flavor combinations that haven't worked, we're pretty rigorous on dosing. So we'll have our base beer that's finished its primary fermentation, and if it's a really, really wild kind of combination of flavors, we'll quite happily take a portion of that base beer, do a little trial blend, see how it's tasted, make sure it's good. Like every time we get fruit in that we've never had before from a supplier we've not had before, we'll taste the fruit before it goes in the beer. Yeah. And then we'll taste a bit of the fruit in the beer to make sure that it's not going to go totally left. I've been stung with that in previous breweries where the batches of fruit have actually been bad or not as good as they should be, or not as vibrant, or whatever the issue might be, that we've just chucked straight into a beer and then ruined the beer straight off the bat.
I find that we've had fruit in, and it's not that it's not what it should be, but it's completely, especially when we get a lot of I guess harder to find fruits, tropical fruits and things and stuff that's not in season. I smell it and I'm like, that's not what I thought that fruit was, completely. Like passion fruit, I thought I knew what passion fruit tasted like from beer, but I really fucking didn't,
And then you had a passion fruit, you're like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, it's just like beer, what the fuck's going on?
So all this time we're going, this beer tastes like passion fruit. No, maybe not. Maybe it did.
That happens sometimes.
Before we get to the silly beer, or we
better do that.
Before we get to the silly sour, you guys are doing your Sour Sundays. Talk us about that.
Yeah, so Sour Sunday is a kind of phrase that we coined at the beginning of lockdown. So back at the beginning of 2020, when we hastily put together our first web shop, we put our beers up that we had in tank. We were packaging from tank to put on the web shop, but it quite quickly turned out that we only had these 3 beers to sell, which isn't very exciting for an indefinite amount of time before we cleared these tanks. So we rummaged through our event stock of kegs. We had like about 2 pallets worth of kegs held back for doing festivals, which is a big part of what Vault City did the year before, and what was planned to be a big part of last year and this year was to go out and actually see people at these beer festivals. So we had all this beer that we weren't able to shift in keg. So we hooked it up to our janky gravity filler, which was perfect at the time because we could easily hook it up to a keg and use that as a mini fermenter. And we bottled out the beer straight from kegs. and we're able to release them kind of one at a time to keep people interested and keep a bit of excitement going about the beers. So bringing back some old historical releases, which was really a big thing for a lot of people, especially as we now had a web shop, which we didn't have before. So we coined Sour Sunday as our launch day. So we released the beers then, and it stuck, and people seemed to like the concept. And I mean, Stout Sunday can fucking do one. So we pushed the agenda on Sour Sunday, and that's now when we release our beers. So we have a turnaround on our modern sour beer of about 2 weeks. So for session, serious, and silly, it can vary depending on the fruits, depending on the additions, depending on what's happening with beer, how strong it is. But give or take, we've got about a 2 week turn on the beers. So we have a release of one of each of those categories every 2 weeks on a Sunday, on Sour Sunday. And that's our big push. So we do an early access release at 11 o'clock for our newsletter subscribers. They get a private link to get you in ahead of the queue. And then we hit the go live button at 12 for general sale as well. So that's when you can get hold of the new beers on our website, on our web shop. That session sour is really doing a number on me. So
it's funny as well. Someone on social media recently, hashtag Tart Tuesdays. They were drinking one of our beers on a Tuesday. And I was like, why don't we just like make people bankrupt and release 3 beers on a Sunday and then 3 beers on a Tuesday as well?
You're turning the overtone. This whole
yeah, right.
30 beers a month or what phrase they were up to.
Before we go for the third S, can I ask? You mentioned it already. Kind of led me into it pretty well. There's a fourth S that's been missed in Vault City, and I'm going to mention this purely for Joe's benefit because I know that he likes these as well. I had a couple. I've had the privilege of having 2 Vault City Stouts previously. Yeah. I can tell by the reaction already. No, I had a coconut one that you could have stood a spoon up in, which for me was absolutely superb. And then I've had the vanilla and almond one as well, which I also thought was superb. Will that fourth S ever make a return? Maybe not in the current season, but or next couple of seasons anyway. But
actually, it already has made a return.
There we go.
So we did the return of the fourth S, which you're quite right is the stouts that we released. So they're not sour stouts; they are straight up stouts.
Proper.
That's the benefit of our yeast being not totally wild is that we actually have a bit of control over bringing other yeast into the brewery. But the stouts we released, the ones you mentioned, the coconut cream it was, and the vanilla and almond we brought out just at the beginning of lockdown as well. So it wasn't long after lockdown started that we released those guys. That's actually the event that broke our website and broke me.
Trust us stout. Trust us stout.
So they went absolutely bonkers and people went wild from 9.5% double mash imperial stouts. So our first double mash, huge brew day, mental recipe, which actually originates back from like 1885. Wow. So we tweaked a recipe that we found in some historical archives to bring that back into life. And it was insane. Coconut cream was a bold choice. And that was one of the beers that was a beer, that didn't go the way we thought it would. And we weren't sure whether we should release it or not. But when we tasted it, it was friggin' delicious. And it was that real heartbreaking moment of, do we put out something that's got loads of coconut cream still in suspension, or do we put out something that's super fucking delicious? And we had to go for it. We put a big disclaimer out. We told there's actually still an Instagram highlight of my partner showing you how to open one by shaking it first and giving it a hard pour and all the rest of it. And there's a few messy pours on the go, but it got really well received. The ratings on it were through the roof. People absolutely loved the flavor and character of the beer. So kind of massive mad moment for us to do this huge stout and the vanilla and almond as well. But a third portion of that batch, so we split it in 3. We did the 2 additions for release at the time, and then we put the third of it into Speyside whiskey barrels. So we tucked it into Speyside whiskey barrels for about 9 months, and we actually released those at Christmas just past. So they have made a return already. We launched them at Christmas, and we did a honeycomb turnover edition. And then we also did a maple and coconut, but not with coconut cream. So we brought back the coconut, but we went desiccated this time. And they were absolutely banging. The spirit character was really gentle, a little bit of smoke, some licorice. They were insane. And yes, the fourth S of stouts will definitely be back. We're working on some recipes at the moment. Got a cool collab on the works as well.
Wow.
Maybe some more barrels knocking around for the clean stuff. Can't give away too much.
That's all right.
But
I've got to
as long
admit-
as it's there, just as long as it's still,
This is why I
it's
like-
there bubbling away in the background.
Oh, it's going. Don't worry. It'll be back.
This is why I let Andy do the talking, because I'll just like reveal.
You tell us everything. Oh, and we're going to have this.
Mute Andy. Let's get good talking. Let's get on drinking.
The screen.
Maple and coconut's a brave one, I've got to admit, because of like maple's sweet, and obviously coconut is like super sweet as well. And then throwing that in a stout, which, you know, if depending on how, you know, if you go roasty or like proper roasted in that sense, or if it is more like sort of chocolate, you've got to be really fine. It's fine lines balancing a lot of that sweetness up. And
For
all
sure. And that's luckily that's something we do with our sour beers all the time. You know, we have that big level of sweetness which we use to balance our acidity. So flipping it on its head, having that sweet additions of coconut and maple on a stout that was actually pretty roasty. So there's quite a lot of dark chocolate bitterness, kind of cocoa nibs, coffee, a little bit of ashy smoke coming in there as well, and the spirit character from the whiskey. I mean, it was a big, thick stout, don't get me wrong. But those flavors definitely helped to round out the whole package. The maple and coconut was a really cool combination of flavors. I think it was Steve came up with that one. That
said it is interesting for sure. It's just like you say, it's when you hear those things. I know you balancing that. You hear those two right together, and you think, I better get an appointment with a dentist after this.
I was just giggling away there because I seen a spotted Scott opening the bottle again and sniffing away at a wee smell on your face. You've done a good job of the last two starting us off. You may as well kick us off again and take us on to the silly, Miguel.
Right, okay. So this is daft. Beyond belief.
Start.
I mean, you can smell it. You can smell it at arm's length. This in the glass. You can smell it about there.
Do you know what they drink in the Congo?
Yeah, yeah.
Congo.
way down deep.
Yes, very much so. And this is exactly it. It's a silly,
Holy fuck.
viscous, but so smooth, such a smooth. So I better go with the fruit first. So it's guava, kiwi, melon, and mango, that's hefty. Right away, there's a lot of pulp there with that. But it's not. I mean, it is viscous in the glass. It's supposed to be. It's packed up. I mean, you've effectively run this and some great beer through a juicer and put it into my glass for me, fresh. That's what it looks like. It looks like an incredible smoothie that you've made, but it's so smooth when you're drinking it. It's sophisticated. The fruit's there in spades, but it's also fun. It's incredibly fun. It's 10%, so it's not messing. You're going to take your time drinking it. The flavors are going to develop even more as it warms up if you've pulled it out of the fridge. It's another kind of sorbet in a glass side of things. It does have the sourness there in spades. It does draw your jaws together.
Yeah,
perfectly, exactly as I want it if I'm drinking a beer of this kind of heft, and it's absolutely superb. It is on bongo.
Right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've just seen Mark do some like karate moves and make some faces.
Fucking hell, mate.
But the kiwi in it.
The kiwi is
so strong. Like I thought, that's the one. If there's one here that's going to fade, it's going to be that I'm not going to get. It's going to be kiwi, but it's there.
Totally.
It's there.
Tastes more like a kiwi than a kiwi.
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm talking about.
Man.
You know,
This is one of the things like those passion fruits. I don't know how many of you regularly eat guava, but this for me,
I never have
all guava.
Scotty's on out a guava every morning.
Aye, that's what it is. For sure.
Sorry, Mark, how you holding up with that one?
This is I
That's
feel
a shift.
You've got a smile on your face, so that's a good stuff.
He's loving it.
I do. I actually do love it.
No way.
No, honestly, because this actually, it's not overly sour. It has a tartness to it, but it's like a fruit smoothie. Like honestly, you throw a couple of scoops of protein in this and you'll have it for your breakfast.
Genuinely, I was like, it looks like it's like that thick. It's like a protein shake thing almost.
Well,
It's incredible.
Actually, you know, we talk about the whole mouthfeel thing. And like this takes mouthfeel to like the newest of levels.
We need a new term.
Level up.
This is well, this might be 2 levels because normally with like I like a hefty beer. Like I like a full-bodied beer is the way I like to say it, and I like it to kind of coat my tongue. And I like it when you put the glass down, you're still getting that sort of dancing across your tongue.
Mate, this isn't just coating your tongue. This is coating your ribs.
This is like, and this thing it's like the gift that keeps on giving when you stop drinking it. Like you just
it keeps coming back on you quite a lot.
Yeah.
It does have a wee bit of like it's like you've got the sediment. It's like, you know, when you have like I call it full fat orange juice. You know, like where it's got like the pulp in it
with bits.
With bits. You know, there is bits there, but it is just.
But it isn't bits that are going to make you taste. It doesn't taste like it's got bits in it. If that makes sense. Like I think it's still quite smooth. You can tell there's it's heft there and there's bags of fruit in it. But again, it laces there is there's bits that lace the glass, like your commenter mentioned that it's fruit lacing, and this is it exactly. But I think it still has.
It's also nice and smooth.
It doesn't lose the refinement that you expect in that type of bottle, and the kind of ethos that and the USP that Vault City has is, well, ram it full of fruit, but still make it you think that you're drinking something that's refined.
That's exactly
of that level.
Balance. There's that body and viscosity actually help to bring those fruit flavors to life. Like the acidity of our mixed culture isn't crazy sour in this one, like Mark was saying, but that acidity is about bang on level with a kiwi.
That's it. It's like drinking a fruit juice rather than a sour beer.
Yeah, so it's got that level of acidity that you'd expect from it. It's like raspberry beers. Raspberry beer should be sharp and linear and tart, like eating a raspberry. Whereas a blueberry beer should be softer, more smooth, and should feel more like the fruit. So that kiwi element, that acidity helps keep that in, but also that body to it and that viscosity, that intensity of the fruiting levels that we've got there help to tie in all of those tropical fruits, especially the guava, which is really pulpy, really fleshy.
What does the melon sort of bring to it? Because that's probably the only one that I would say that I
get it on the nose.
Missing.
I get it on the nose. I love melon, so I get the melon's the one I get in the nose, definitely.
Didn't you put your face too close to that glass? You'll actually get it in your nose.
It's a weird one because I was surprised the melon was one of the flavors I got the most. Which is a weird one. And I didn't get as much kiwi until was it Mark that mentioned it, and now I'm just getting kiwi now, you know.
Yeah.
For me,
it's a fun one to pick apart. There's each fruit for me kind of vies for attention every time. There's whether I'm kind of, you know, smelling it orthonasally or retronasally or letting it sit on my palate or the aftertaste or whatever way. There's always a little bit of something different every time I have a sip, which I find really exciting. That for me is something that gets my dander up.
I can get on board.
10% is just
where is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, dangerous.
Alexa disappeared there because I had to before it disappears in my glass. I had to give the wife a wee sip because she quite like sours and she went,
bro,
that's just fruit juice. That's just a breakfast smoothie. And I was like, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just dangerous. A smoothie. It is dangerous as hell. But oh my god, what
this is one out of all the ones that we've tried so far. This is the one that, for me, is Vault City, if that makes sense. For me, being a non-real sour drinker, like the strawberry skies of the world, your Bakewell tarts and stuff, I see them and I totally appreciate the skill that goes involved to making them. And I know the guys have raved about them. I'm like, that's fine. I'll get a wee sorbet, a wee espresso shot of it and move on. Whereas this thing here is proper,
there's no messing.
It is proper. I think that's the only way I can really describe it because you're getting it's a discussion beer. I can imagine the six of us sitting in the tap room with 2/3 of this each after a few scoops, and the conversation would be pretty badass because, like you say, it would be, I'm getting melon, I'm not getting melon. Now I am getting melon, but I'm not getting the kiwi, and it's just so complex that I'm.
I think Strawberry Skies, a beer we released, I don't know, a year ago, maybe more than that. I think was one of the ones that really kind of got our name out there a little bit more, and put us on the map a little bit. And it was kind of like an 8.5%, massive kind of strawberry with some vanilla in it. And then I think from then, certainly only been with the brewery for 3 months now. I noticed it before, I just thought Vault City always nailed those big, really, really big fruity beers. And I think this is like a prime example of one of the things that we do just fucking incredibly,
Definitely, 100%. And it definitely sits in that silly category because it is it's just stupidly good.
It's next level. Like you said, we spoke to Brick this week, which seems like ages ago now, but we spoke to Brick this week, and Ian was quite upfront about how they do their sours, and the sour beer that they had was also very, very, very good. But it's totally different to your sour beer.
But the funny thing was as well, in that podcast, if you remember, we asked him what other beers did he drink, and he said the other people's sour. He doesn't drink many other sours, but the only ones tend to be Vault City.
It was funny. Yeah, it's just really complex, really well done, sessionable drinks, but it's 10.5%. It doesn't make any sense.
Anything's sessionable if you believe in yourself.
I mean, I thought that as fruity way back, and this shows the kind of naivety pre-having Strawberry Skies, was the Go Supermarket for a second, because it was one of my favourites as I was 18, 19, was the Bacchus stuff in the paper.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was as fruity beer could get, and then I had Strawberry Skies, and I was like, Jesus Christ, it's not even the same planet.
Totally.
I first heard about Strawberry Skies, believe it or not, my mate Jamie, who listens to the podcast pretty readily, his local is the High Cross in Tottenham.
Oh yeah.
And there used to be a gents' toilets. And that was he had it first and had messaged me and was like, he says, "Nah, you've got to try this. This is incredible." He's like, he had it on draft, and I was like, right, okay. I was like, I'll see if I can get some. He says, I can't believe that it's made there, and I've had some before you. Mm-hmm. But I managed to get some, and there was no looking back after that. After that, it was everything we could get with that logo, and it's sublime. And that's another this is incredible.
Thanks.
I got the other half seal of approval as well. Melted Solero was the verdict.
Yep.
Absolutely,
nice. You know what? It's probably the first time ever, and in fact, I'm pretty sure it is on the podcast where we've actually had to run to the other halves to go.
Try that.
I've seen a few people disappearing off the screen.
Well, I've got a complete non-sour drinker sitting, and he's given the seal of approval to all three tonight. So
yeah, there's it's amazing. I constantly get blown away by how people who don't like sour beer or even don't like beer actually love Vault City stuff. I kind of see it on this spectrum. I talk about this quite a lot, but you've got kind of you're getting into beer, and I think most of us probably went on a similar trajectory. You start out drinking beer, drinking lagers or whatever the hell you can get your hands on in the park. Yep. And then you progress on to maybe an IPA or the cask route. That's kind of typically the next step is one or another, and you go, holy crap, like this beer has so much flavor, and I can go out and try all these different beers and experience all this different stuff. And then you generally go on to have a stout phase. And if you're like me, you go off and have a barley wine phase for 6 months and then you end up at sour beer at this top end, right? And that's the super nerdy elite end. You're at the pinnacle of kind of beer and craft beer is the sour beer stuff. But then you go right back again to the other side. You've got the people that actively don't like beer because it's bitter. And you've got hops the whole way through, or some level of bitterness the whole way through until you get to sour beer, where for our beers anyway, we don't use any hops. That's not the predominant flavor. There's not a bitter element to it. It's sweet, it's sour, and it's fruity. And that's what people who like wine and cider really like. So they end up drinking this beer and end up right back around on the other side of the spectrum at kind of the end of the road and almost reversing back into beer. And that for me is really exciting, where you've got people who are super passionate about it and people who are just there because they've had a go and think it's great.
Yeah.
And that's a really nice melting point of being able to geek out if you want to get geeky, but also able to hang out and just chill and enjoy some tasty beverages, because that's what it's all about.
100%.
Just jump in there. Like, for me, it kind of goes against what I've always deemed as sour beer, if that makes sense, because we've tried a lot of sour beer and from loads of different breweries, and it usually is that, like you say, that acidic punch. And usually when it's done well, you get a flavour of whatever kind with it. But for me, the part of like drinking beer as a whole is the enjoyment aspect. I love sour sweeties. I love all that stuff, but it's a sweetie. Yeah. When it comes to drinking beer, I don't always want like my jaws clenched together, and I've never really enjoyed that particular style.
That's part of it, is the balance, right, of that sweetness.
Bingo. For me, like, this is probably like I've tried a couple of Vault City beers before, but they get branded as they're just sour beers. So for me, I just kind of was like I'll try it if it comes. However, this is totally different. It's not like, that's what I'm saying. It's not what I would deem sour beer. It has a tartness to it, and it does have a bit of sour flavour in, but it's not drawing your cheeks together for the sake of drawing your cheeks together.
Yeah, that's it. It's a really difficult kind of category, because you've got so many different methods, so many different practices, so many different processes and ingredients and bacteria and microbes that can make sour beer. That you have this huge range of characters of beer. You've got from straight up kettle soured, very linear, very simple, I would call them, sour beers. Mm-hmm. And then you've got all the way up the other end, you've got barrel aged, complex, dry, tannic, almost wine-like sour beers, or even aged in amphora and that sort of stuff. So you've got this huge range in between those kind of two extremes, I would say. And a lot of people that are making sour beers, for me anyway, my personal opinion is that they make them for the sake of being sour, not because it benefits the character of the beer. That's something that Vault City have always strived for, is balance, and always strive for is recreating a flavor. So like our Bakewell series, we do an almond and vanilla addition to fruit to make a whatever fruit Bakewell sour. That's not a beer that we're going to let our mixed culture go crazy and ramp up the acidity on. That's the beer that we want to have tart, so it matches up to the fruit element, but then still have that sweetness. It's definitely going to be more rounded, more smooth. If we've got a straight up kiwi sour, that's going to be pretty tart. Or like our Havana mojito session sour. That was the most sour beer we've ever done, down at 2.7 pH, which is fucking stupid. I mean, that may have been because I put 3 times as much lime juice as I was supposed to put. Hey, it tasted delicious and it tasted like limes and it fit the character of the beer. So yeah, it's a really tricky one where you've got all of these different producers making all of these different styles of sour beer all under that one tiny category. I mean, you can go to the other extreme where, or the kind of two extremes with judging and with awards. You've got like the World Beer Awards. I think they have 5 categories for beer for the whole world. It's like, I think I'll pass. And then you've got the BJCP, where you've got, I think, 142 different styles, and like 90 of them are IPA. Like, that can also kind of get fucked as well. But calling all sour beer just sour beer is really tough for exactly that purpose that Mark was saying. If you have a couple of sour beers and you don't like them, you see sour beer on the board or in the menu or online, you're going to go, nah, that's not for me, because I tried that once and I didn't like it. There's so many different kinds of sour beer out there. And that's why we kind of put a stamp on this idea of modern sour beer as setting it apart from a lot of the other stuff. I think there's a real nomenclature debate and issue and clarity piece there. So our kind of push for it is to call our own beers modern sour beer. If other people want to call it that as well, that's cool. I think the idea of people putting pastry sour on stuff kind of works, but it also, I think it detracts. That puts me off a bit. Like a pastry stout, totally on board with. A pastry sour, I'm a bit not into, despite the fact that we make sour beers.
Tastes like pastry.
That's irrelevant. So yeah, I think there's a whole piece there that's
no, definitely
very tricky. It's kind of
there is. You can have that. Like we've sat through and drank 3 sours this evening, and you could drink, like you said, a lot of people make sours for the sake of making sour beer, and sometimes if you have 1 or 2 sours, you've had them and your mouth's really dry, and you're like, I can't have another sour. Where I don't know, but I know Mark's disappeared to go and grab himself another beer, but I don't know for yourself, Callum and McGill, like with these sours are completely different in terms of like you could drink a couple of them, but you can continue to drink them because they don't leave that really dry taste in your mouth. You're happily keep going back and back to these Vault City beers.
Yeah, for me, it's about the process. It's calling it a sour beer is because that's the way you've brewed it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like sour for the sake of being sour. Like I totally get that comment. Like some of the beers that you buy that are classed as sours, it's as if they've made a beer and they've just decided, right, we're going to make this sour, and they've made a raspberry beer, or they've made an orange beer, or blood orange, or whatever it is, and then they've just decided to sour the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to make it fit that label.
I think as well, it's similar for me in when folk talk about lager, as if it's this kind of one style of kind of pale, kind of shitty piss water, when there's, you've got kind of double digit kind of dark lagers, you've got really clean stuff, you've got, smoked stuff, you've got unfiltered kind of lagers, there's a huge breadth of, there's a huge breadth in terms of the range and sour as well. And I think the States, we tend to follow the States quite a lot in terms of beer trends. And I think, I'm hoping anyway, I'm sure Andy will agree that it would be great to see the kind of the idea of modern sour beer growing a little bit more in the UK as well. Definitely. And I think it will happen.
Well, if you guys keep pumping out beers like this, I'm pretty fucking sure it'll happen. Obviously, pandemic has been a bit of a piss poor fucking thing, and it can go fuck itself. For you guys, for the rest of the year, for 2021, what have we got to look ahead for Vault City?
So coming up, the big one for us this year is getting our tap room up and going. So we are in planning stages. I'm probably not supposed to say this. Maybe don't post this podcast until the tap room's actually happened. So I saw that look of terror in your face there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to edit that bit.
So we've got the tap room coming up, which is going to be a big piece. We've just landed in Portobello. We're really keen to get to know our community better. We think it's a really cool spot. It's been great kind of popping down the high street, seeing the other businesses that are there. I can't wait to go and have a beer on the beach and like pick up some snacks and go and hang out in a cafe and that sort of thing down there. So yeah, getting to know our local community by having our tap room and inviting people to our space to actually have our beer where we make it. Yeah. And that whole piece is a really exciting one for us and something that we've been aiming for a long time. So to see that come to fruition is going to be amazing.
Just to jump in on that, sorry to interrupt you there, but what made you pick Portobello? I meant to ask you this earlier because...
Why not? There's a fantastic bingo hall there.
Yeah, that's great.
That's why, yeah. How did you know that?
Of course.
I used to be assistant manager.
Oh, legend.
Gav is the caller.
That's why I host. That's why I've got
You've got the voice for it.
Yeah.
Like when you think about Portobello and obviously like the city centre, the rest of it, you have a little bit more kind of foot traffic in the city centre compared to obviously out with. So what made Portobello kind of the perfect spot for you?
There's several reasons, joint and several. In the centre, there's already quite a lot of breweries and tap rooms, so you're competing for a lot of space there. It's a lot more expensive in the centre. If you're out with a little bit, you get the people that want to be there, as opposed to the Bermondsey Beer Mile shit show that you end up just every fucking man, cow, and his horse ends up being rat-arsed in your tap room and causing an absolute scene. We're also a little bit more community vibed out that way, so we can have a kind of regular crowd that actually are regulars and we can build a relationship with and be part of that community. Portobello has always been a really kind of cool spot. The amount of indie businesses there that are popping up, have been popping up and are continuing to pop up is a great thing to be part of. That's something to definitely rally around. And also the warehouse was available.
Go easy.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was the right size of warehouse that came up at the time when we were looking to move at the right price. The opportunity to jump into Portobello's scene for all the reasons I've just mentioned as the fluff piece were too good to pass up. There you go. You can edit that bit out when I said piss.
That's that guava hitting you.
That's staying in there. But no, I agree. Yeah, Portobello's a groovy, funky little place. I've spent quite a bit of time working there. Enjoying the high street, like we said, with all the kind of trendy indie little businesses that were there before. So yeah, and like you said, you're definitely going to get people venture out there just to see you guys, and that's the people you want, the people who want to be there, who aren't just there for a piss up.
I think it's a 10-minute bus ride to town, something like that, and maybe a 15-minute bus ride to Leith. So if you're doing a bit of a taproom crawl down the Leith walk, then you're only a 15-minute sober up before you hit Vault City again.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense.
That's actually I would say an understated kind of place for pretty good beer and pretty good, really, really, really good food. You've got obviously you've got crossing stuff there, but I mean, if you've not been for one of the portions of nachos at the SB before, then you've missed it big time. Yeah. The SB's incredible.
Well, the SB's awesome.
Portobello Tap, you've got Beer Zoo, you've got the other kind of beer and wine shop there as well. It's, I mean, you could, if the weather's decent and you're hitting the beach, you can hit all the shops, then get draft stuff, and then if you get to then come and have a sour as well, I think you can spend the whole day there. You don't need to do that 15-minute bus journey really. If you don't want to, you can kick about there for the whole day quite happily.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I mean, 5-7 minute walk, from Portobello High Street as well. So we might as well just be on the High Street, really.
Yeah, it's maybe a Herculean stone's throw, but it is a stone's throw to the beach.
Yes.
If you stand on the brewery roof, you can see the prom.
The slingshot.
Yeah. As long as you hit a bird that's flying in the right direction.
Yes, definitely. Sounds good. Gentlemen, the best place for people to grab hold of Vault City beer.
So the best place is definitely our web shop. So we mentioned earlier, we have the Sour Sunday segment every 2 weeks. So you can get signed up to our newsletter, get early access, get ahead of the crowd. Make sure you definitely get these sour beers because they disappear pretty quick. And then outside of that, hit up your local bottle shop. If we are not stocked in your local craft beer bottle shop, hound them until we do. But yeah, we obviously love to have people on our web shop, and please come and crash our site again like we had last Sunday. That was fun for me. And aside from that, we want you guys to really support your local bottle shops because they're the guys that have kept us through the whole of lockdown, and we owe them so much. So show them a bit of love too.
Definitely. Here. vaultcity.co.uk if you want to visit the web shop and get your stuff direct. But like Andy said, your good local bottle shop should be stocking Vault City, and if they're not, get them fucking told to get it in. There's fridges ready for you to indulge and enjoy. Gentlemen, I've run out of questions. You three got anything else you want to add?
No, I'm in awe.
Beers are incredible.
The beers are.
I've managed to. You've been moaning about the lack of pictures of late, Gavin. Yes. So I made a point of taking some snazzy pictures, or what I like to think are snazzy pictures of the first two beers. But that third beer was just so amazing that I just forgot to take pictures.
Awesome. So we just take a picture of the empty glass. That'll prove its point enough.
Look at that.
Exactly, it's not lasted long in my glass either. I'm trying to savour the last little trickle here.
Yeah, get a timestamp at the start of it and the timestamp when you finish it, and that should say it all.
Definitely. Definitely. Gentlemen, absolute pleasure having you on this evening. Make sure you go to vaultcity.co.uk and grab some of the beers. As always, Beerfish Podcast, real beer, real breweries, real opinions. We are sponsored by This Week in Craft.beer. Head to thisweekincraft.beer, sign up to the weekly newsletter. Sign up to that and get the new beers list and all the news from your favourite breweries as well. head to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Beer Fridge Podcast. Be like Joe and subscribe.
Be like Joe.
Be like Joe. That's the slogan. Be like Joe.
Be like me. I'll take that.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to be like
Get some
Joe.
merch with that on it.
You know what? Done. Yeah, and head to patreon.com/Beer Fridge Podcast. Get access to exclusive content on there. Gents, thank you so much for coming on. An absolute pleasure. This has been good fun.
It's been an absolute blast. You guys,
and we cannot wait to come and visit the tap room and have a session with you guys in person.
Good.
Looking forward to it.
Until next time, cheerio, bye.
Cheers.
Bye.